Good evening, everyone. We're again reviewing while Venerable Children is away traveling, but the great news is that Venerable Children is returning back to the Abbey tomorrow. So we're all gearing up for that. And at the moment, actually, we're in day 3 or day 2 of a Vajrasattva retreat. So the topic that we're going to be meditating on tonight and discussing a bit is karma, the general characteristics of karma. This is a very vast topic, and Geshe Sopa wrote an entire volume on it. So we're not going to get to all aspects of karma tonight. This is the general characteristics. So just so you know, I think there'll be lots for us to chew on. Since these reviews are tending towards more meditation than someone talking, I really recommend that if you're in a chair at home, that you sit away from the back of the chair, and if you're on a couch at home, you might as well get a blanket and maybe turn down the volume because you're going to go to sleep, and I wouldn't want to interrupt that. So if you can get yourself into an upright chair or a cushion at home, that would be great too. Your choice. All right. So let's just review the sitting posture that we're going to be trying to keep for a duration of time. If you're sitting in a chair, have your feet touching the floor and your back away from the back of the chair. Your right hand is on top of your left, with thumbs touching and resting on your thighs. You can lower your eyes, but don't close them, because if they're closed, that's going to guarantee some snoring or drifting off. So just have them open far enough so that you can maintain an alert mind. We'll begin with a short body scan. So bring your attention right now to the soles of your feet. And if you're sitting in a chair, just feel the contact of the floor with the soles of your feet. And if you're sitting cross-legged, just notice the sensation on the bottom of your feet. And with each place in the body that we bring our attention to tonight, imagine the whole area just softening and relaxing. And it might be quite amazing to notice how much tension we can hold just in our feet. So just let it relax and soften. And then move to your ankles. And again, just in your imagination, imagine being inside the joint. And just this, taking our mind there, can allow that area, again, to relax, to soften. Then take your awareness to the calves and into the knee joint and up to the thighs. And just notice if there's any kind of holding going on, and if there is, just let it go. And now bring your attention to your sit bones. And just allow the weight of your body to sink into that area. And if you allow your weight to sink into the sit bones, there'll be this reflex action of the lifting of your spine. Just sink into the sit bones and allow your spine to gently rise up. And then bring your attention to your lower abdomen. And just let that area relax. Don't pull it in. Just allow your stomach to, and lower abdomen to, just soften and see what happens. And as you relax the lower area of your abdomen, you may notice something interesting happening with your breathing. You may notice that you're breathing less from the upper chest and more from the abdomen area, which is better. And now bring your attention to your spine and imagine that the vertebrae are like coins, stacking one on top of the other. And you may want to tip forwards and backwards just a little bit to see if you're centered. And then from side to side, just to find that upright, balanced place. And now bring your attention to your upper back and shoulder area. And this is a place where we tend to store a lot of our tension, so we'll just raise up our shoulders and let them go on an out breath. And we'll do that 2 more times. And now you can bring your attention to your facial muscles. And if you have the image of a slight smile, it may not even be visible, but the feeling will show and your face will relax a little bit more. So we'll take a few minutes now just to focus our mind on the breath. And so to set a motivation for our time together tonight, let's really rejoice that we're engaging in this kind of virtuous activity on the first Friday night of 2015. And there may be certain points throughout the meditation or the discussion tonight that your mind may want to resist. And just notice that. Just notice the resistance, or maybe it'll feel unpleasant. And again, just notice it, but just really coax your mind to stay open and just to be curious. So that maybe later on, after you've heard more teachings, then you can come back to these certain points that are perhaps a bit troubling maybe, or challenging. And to really take time to consider the ones that are going to encourage change, so that we can continue to grow our wisdom and compassion in the direction of our compass, which is pointed towards full awakening for the benefit of all beings. In the space in front, on a precious throne, both high and wide, supported by 8 great lions, on a seat of a multicolored lotus, moon and sun discs, is my kind main spiritual mentor in the form of the conqueror Shakyamuni. The color of his body is pure gold. On his head is the crown protuberance. He has 1 face and 2 hands. The right touches the earth. The left, in meditation posture, holds an alms bowl full of nectar. Elegantly, he wears the 3 saffron-colored monastic robes. His body made of pure light and adorned with the signs and marks of a Buddha emanates a flood of light. Sitting in Vajra posture, he is surrounded by my direct and indirect spiritual mentors, by deities, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas, heroes, heroines, and an assembly of Arya Dharma protectors. In front of him on exquisite stands are his teachings in the form of books of light. The members of the merit field look upon me with contentment. In turn, at the thought of their compassion and virtue, I have great faith in them. Then think, I and all sentient beings, my mothers from beginningless time until now, have continuously undergone the dukkha of cyclic existence in general, and the suffering of the 3 lower realms in particular. Nevertheless, it is still difficult to fathom the depth and breadth of this misery. Now that I've attained a precious human life, so difficult to attain, and so meaningful once acquired. If I do not realize supreme liberation in which all the dukkha of samsara is overcome, Guru Buddhahood, then once again I will have to experience the various torments of cyclic existence in general, and those of the 3 lower realms in particular. As I now have before me the mentor and the 3 jewels who can protect me from this pain, for the sake of all sentient beings, I will do all that I can to realize perfect, precious, and consummate Buddhahood. To this end, from the depths of my heart, I take refuge in the spiritual mentors and the 3 jewels. Namo Guru Vya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Guruvya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Guruvya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. So after we recite the 4 immeasurables, we'll pause for a moment to contemplate them more deeply. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. We'll continue with the 7-limb prayer. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I confess all my destructive actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the virtues of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until cyclic existence ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate all the virtues of myself and others to the Great Awakening. And now bring to mind everything that you hold as precious and dear, everything you're deeply attached to, all the beautiful places that you've been, the beautiful experiences you've had, the Dharma teachings, which are so precious. And then as well, everything that we struggle with and have aversion for, and we're going to offer all of this freely to the holy beings. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. The objects of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, friends, enemies, and strangers, my body, wealth, and enjoyments, I offer these without any sense of loss. Please accept them with pleasure and inspire me and others to be free from the three poisonous attitudes. Iram Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Glorious and precious root Guru, sit upon the lotus and moon seat on my crown. Guiding me with your great kindness, bestow upon me the attainments of your body, speech, and mind, the eyes for whom the vast scriptures are seen, supreme doors for the fortunate who would cross over to spiritual freedom, illuminators whose wise means vibrate with compassion. To the entire line of spiritual mentors, I make request. So we'll recite Shakyamuni Buddha's mantra 7 times. Tayata Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Soha. 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 So now refresh the image of the Guru deity on your head. The Conqueror's scriptures say that from the cause, that is the practice of virtue, only a result of happiness can occur, not one of suffering. From the cause that is non-virtuous conduct, non-virtuous conduct can only arise as a result of suffering, not one of happiness. Although one may perform only minor virtue or negativity, when either fails to encounter an obstacle, it gives rise to a result of great magnitude. If you perform neither virtue nor negativity, you will experience neither happiness nor suffering. If the virtue or negativity performed encounters no obstacle, the action performed will not go wasted. It is certain to produce either happiness or misery. Furthermore, depending on its object, the thinking behind it, its nature and basis, it will be happiness nor suffering. If the virtue or negativity performed encounters no obstacle, the action performed will not go wasted. Having generated faith based on conviction in this way, may I strive to do good, starting with minor virtue, the 10 virtues, and so on. And may my 3 doors of action not be sullied by even the slightest non-virtue, such as the 10 non-virtues. Guru Deity, please inspire me to be able to do so. In response to your requesting the Guru Deity, 5-colored light and nectar stream from all parts of his body into you through the crown of your head. It absorbs into your mind and body and those of all sentient beings, purifying all negativities and obscurations accumulated since beginningless time, and especially purifying all illnesses, spirit interferences, negativities, and obscurations that interfere with generating faith based on conviction of karma and its effects, with correctly producing good deeds and abstaining from bad deeds. Your body becomes translucent, the nature of light. All your good qualities, lifespan, merit, and so forth expand and increase. Think in particular that having cultivated faith in the form of conviction of karma and its effects, a superior realization of abstention from negativities and correct practice of virtue has arisen in your mind stream and in the mind streams of others. Although you may strive in this manner, If due to the feebleness of your antidotes and the strength of your afflictions, you are sullied by non-virtue, do your utmost to purify it by means of the 4 opponent powers, and abstain from it henceforth. So now to look more deeply at these points. There are 4 general characteristics of karma. The first quality is, when we experience suffering, it comes from negative or destructive karma. Happiness comes from virtuous karma, and it is never the opposite. It is never the case that suffering comes from virtue and happiness comes from non-virtue. In many theistic religions, it's usually the Creator who sets up the rules and delivers it to human beings and says, do this and don't do that. If you do the things you've been told not to do, you'll be punished and sent to hell. If you do the things that I told you to do, then you are rewarded by going to heaven. The Buddha did not make up the rules. The Buddha is not a creator. He only described how things function. Because of the Buddha's incredible psychic powers, when he saw beings experiencing happy results, he could see what kind of cause they'd created, usually in a previous life, that led to this particular happy result. And those different causes that would later ripen in a positive result, they were called virtue or wholesome actions. When the Buddha saw suffering, he could see the actions that brought that suffering. And those actions were labeled unwholesome actions. In this we see that the Buddha did not make up the law of cause and effect. He only described it. Virtue and non-virtue are merely designated in relationship to the results that they bring. Nothing is inherently one thing or the other, but it still functions. If we create non-virtue, it is going to bring suffering. And if we create virtue, it will bring happiness. So our actions have an ethical dimension. Do we think throughout the day, what I am doing has an ethical dimension that is going to influence my future lives and what I will experience in the future? And if we are thinking about the results of our actions, perhaps we're likely only thinking about the immediate result that happens in this life. But this is a short-term view because the actions that we do have an immediate result in this life. But the karmic result is what happens in future lives. So now bring to mind an interaction with another person that you have had and you've labeled it unpleasant. In the past, did you immediately think, oh, wonderful, this is the ripening of some negativity that I've created in the past. How fortunate that it's ripening now, so that I can experience the results of what I have done to another in the past. Or did we think, and let's be honest, this person is despicable. He or she is so mean-spirited. Her use of vulgar language is totally offensive and grotesque. And she or he is the reason for my unhappiness. There's the source of my suffering. Or in other circumstances, maybe we've had the thought, oh, if that person was not part of the team, we would have harmony in this business. Or on other days, maybe we've thought, if they would only cook the food exactly in the way that suits my preferences, I'd be much healthier and I'd be way more efficient and productive. Or maybe we've had the thought, if only that person in the meditation hall would stop moving and yawning out loud, I would have had a realization at least of subtle impermanence by now. So that kind of thinking is not in line with taking responsibility for the fact that whatever state we're experiencing, happiness or suffering, does not come from the other. It doesn't come from the outside. It comes from creating virtue or non-virtue in our own mind. So the second quality of karma Although one may perform only minor virtue or negativity, when either fails to encounter an obstacle, it gives rise to a result of great magnitude. A small cause may lead to a very big result. From a very small action, very large results can follow. So, for example, we may say something nasty to our partner, and the longer we leave it without trying to resolve the problem, the more the resentment grows. And we all know this from our individual experience. So we shouldn't think lightly of small actions, whether they're positive or negative, because unless they encounter an obstacle, they will increase. Their power increases. The result they're going to bring increases when they're in our mind stream. So with this in mind, if we care about ourselves, we should not engage in even small negativities. In the same way, small virtuous actions are easy for us to dismiss. So, for example, we keep hitting the snooze button in the morning. We're feeling lazy. So we don't bother to set up our altar and make offerings. It doesn't matter if I don't do it. But if we're really thinking carefully about this second point, about actions bringing big results, huge results, then we don't want to be lazy in creating small actions. Because then we realize we're missing out on the possibility of creating causes that could lead to a really big result. And then the third quality of karma, if you don't create the cause, you don't experience the result. Now, this is one that is harder to accept, especially when we are having unpleasant or suffering experiences. And we've all had the experience of asking, why did this happen to me? Or why did that happen to my friend? Or why did that happen to my mother? And so if we understand karma, it is because we created the cause. So why don't we ask, why me, when it's something wonderful? Why am I able to sleep in a warm building, in a cozy bed? So that's just such a small, fortunate thing that we experience in our life, that we take for granted. But all of that comes through our actions too. If we haven't created the cause for it, we won't experience the result. A very poignant example of this happened last week with the Air Asia flight that disappeared over the Java Sea. 162 people lost their lives. Interestingly enough, there were 23 people who were scheduled to be on that plane, and they didn't get on it. 23 people. One of the passengers who didn't get on that fated flight said, "We were supposed to be on that flight on the 28th. It's eerie." She took a later flight that day after a wedding she had attended ran late. Another family said 10 of them were supposed to fly to Singapore for New Year's Eve, but they all arrived late at the airport and missed the flight. "My mother can't stop crying," said the woman telling the story. Another person wrote on Facebook saying that he was supposed to fly with his wife and their 3 kids, but they canceled their flight when his father fell ill. So we've all had the experience of waiting in line at a grocery store and trying to figure out which line is going to move through the till the fastest. And then we choose the line, and then we figure out it's the slowest moving line in the store. And we think we're understanding karma ripening, but not really. But the next time we're in the slowest line, maybe we can consider that it's keeping us from experiencing some other kind of much greater sorrow or suffering. And then to take the opportunity to engage in small virtues like paying attention to the people around us and inquiring how they are. And the 4th point in the general characteristics of karma once we've created the cause, the result is going to come unless we purify with the 4 opponent powers. And that stops the ripening of negative karma. So another way of saying the 4th point is, if we've committed an action, the karmic aftermath on our mental continuum is not going to go away by itself. It is not going to get so old that it doesn't ripen. Eventually, at some point, unless we purify it, it will ripen. It may take 1,000,000 years, but it will ripen unless we purify it. So as I was going through Venerable Chödrön's teachings on this topic, I've had this feeling again and again, in particular with this topic, that the thought comes, I know this stuff. It's not so hard. But then I look at my mind, and I see my behavior. And so I barely know it. And I don't think I'm alone in moments of having this understanding, but not having it being integrated into the rest of my mind. And I thought I would go through some of the points from Venerable Chödrön's teachings and then embellish them with some of the teachings from Geshe Sopa, because he has such fantastic examples on this topic. And somewhere here, I thought I'd start off with a quote from Geshe Sopa. I hope I can find it. Let's see. So he says this: "It is essential to gain a clear picture of how karma works. It doesn't matter whether you are only seeking higher rebirths within samsara, or whether you are striving for complete emancipation. An understanding and appreciation of karma is absolutely essential. Why? Because if you fail to observe the principles of karma, all the roads leading to a higher rebirth and on to liberation will be blocked. This is the key that opens the door to happiness." So I think I'm also not alone in going through periods of my life where blame was the solution. It's someone else's fault if I'm unhappy. It's someone else's fault if I didn't get this. It's someone else's fault, blah, 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 blah. And the more that we think about karma, that option isn't available anymore. And it's got us in a bit of a corner. Then what? So then we have to take responsibility for our actions and our thinking. So I'm going to go through these 4 points again with more stuff. If something comes to mind that you've remembered that has inspired you, feel free to call out. And we'll see how it goes. Are there any comments right now? Questions we'll do at the end. Any comments? Okay, let's go for it. Okay, the certainty of karma. Now this should be pretty easy to get. Happiness comes from virtue, unhappiness comes from non-virtue. So this is interesting. So listen to this. So there's not even the smallest enjoyable experience that ripens from non-virtue. There is no way that this can happen. Without previous virtue, happiness can't happen. In the same way, whether you look at an ordinary individual or an Arya being, all painful or unpleasant feelings are the result of non-virtuous karma that was previously performed. Although arhats have completely removed all the obscuring afflictions and have achieved liberation from the causes of cyclic existence, they sometimes continue to suffer from small pains and discomforts until they die, because their body was produced by previous karma. Even these subtle forms of suffering can only result from negative karma. There is no way that any kind of unhappiness can ripen from virtuous karma. So even the arhats are still going to have these small pains and sufferings. That was quite striking to read. So I'm just going to keep reading these points again and again and again, because I think this is how we're going to learn. We have to hear these things over and over again. The teachings that we're getting in Arya Deva's 400 stanzas is a perfect example of how the point has to be driven home again and again and again. So Nagarjuna, in his precious garland, writes, "From non-virtues come all sufferings, and likewise all bad migrations. From virtues all happy migrations, and the pleasure of all lives." In other words, happiness and misery do not arise without cause, nor do they arise from causes that are discordant or contradictory with the result. If suffering could arise without a cause, it could arise all the time. There would be no need for particular conditions to enable it to appear. It would just come or not come on a totally arbitrary basis. So here's a story from Geshe Sopa. An illustration of the way in which karma is certain is the story of a monk called Nyanpa Zangdan. He was born with a repulsive appearance because in a previous life he had developed an extremely disrespectful attitude towards a stupa, or a reliquary monument that he was working on. However, because he rejoiced in the stupa when it was complete and offered a lovely golden bell to adorn the completed monument, he was also born with an enchanting singing voice. This story illustrates how karma is certain and how its results are never mixed up or inconsistent. Virtuous karma invariably brings happy results. Non-virtuous karma brings only suffering. Each action brings its own definite, distinct result. So every time we're having an unpleasant, even feeling, we can just bring it to mind, this is the ripening of karma. This is something I've created in the past. So the second point, the magnification of karma. This is the one that makes me very uncomfortable. Karma increases greatly. Even a small virtue can bring a very great blissful result, while a small non-virtuous action can produce great suffering. Either way, the result can be greatly magnified in terms of size, amount, duration, or intensity from the original action that was the cause. So again, we have another story from Geshe Sopa to prove this point. The Buddha was offered a small amount of grain by a woman. And then the Buddha prophesied that this woman would someday obtain Buddhahood. The woman's husband was agitated to hear this, and with a negative attitude, he demanded to know how such a small gesture as offering a handful of grain could possibly produce such a result, a huge result. The Buddha took that occasion to give a detailed explanation of karma and its results. He explained how a seemingly insignificant act, a small karma, increases and produces a very great result. As it says in the collection of indicative verses, performing even a small misdeed will bring great terrors and disaster in future lives, like poison that has been ingested. Performing even a small virtuous, meritorious action will lead to great happiness in the next life, and great purposes will be accomplished, just as grain ripens into bounty. So even a small negative action can produce many unhappy rebirths, and during those lifetimes, we will meet with many unbearable experiences. It can bring great disaster, like poison that's already reached the stomach. In the same way, a small virtuous action will bring great joy in the future and lead to accomplishing great purposes, just as a single healthy seed can produce a tree full of abundant flowers and fruit. So we have great experience with this one at the Abbey with knapweed. If you've ever been here or you're planning to come, you're going to have the great experience of pulling it. And this practice over the years has brought great results, really impressive results. Venerable Tarpa and Venerable Semke can probably go on at length about how the Abbey property looked in 2003 or 2004. But every year, without fail, the residents and the guests here go out pulling and spraying. And now it's really under control in a lot of places on the property. And just across the fence line to our neighbors, in all directions, it's knapweed heaven. It's just, the place is overrun. And so you can see that, concerted efforts bring good results. Okay. So this is more from Geshe Sopa. The Buddha taught karma and its results by means of personal stories which are collected in various sutras and in the Vinaya, that section of the Buddha's teachings dealing with rules for monastic discipline. Tsongkhapa mentions 3 texts which collect many stories relating to the workings of karma: the basis of discipline, the Sutra of the Wise and Foolish, and the 100 Actions Sutra. By reading these stories told by the Buddha, which describe how certain events develop from certain causes, skillful people can come to understand how karma works. The Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish was given this name because when wise or skillful people read it, they can gain a realization of karma and its results. However, when those who are foolish read it and nothing happens, well, they'll not realize anything. So Geshe Sopa says, you can say that the reading of this sutra is a test of which one you are. So this is one short story from the Sutra of the Wise and Foolish. Let's see if anyone flies up into the ceiling when you hear this. Do not disregard small negative acts, thinking they are harmless, because even a small spark can set fire to a mountain of hay. Do not disregard small positive acts, thinking they are without benefit, because even tiny drops of water will eventually fill a large container. So I think for some people these stories maybe don't work so well, but for my mind they really work. Here's another story. The Buddha explained that many millions of years earlier, at the time of the previous Buddha, Kasyapa, a rich and noble family invited that Buddha and his followers to their home where they wished to honor him with offerings. Living nearby was a young boy from a poor family who had nothing to offer. Every day he walked into the hills to gather a small amount of firewood to sell in the market. And from that hard work, he earned a meager living. When the poor boy heard that this noble family had invited the Buddha, he gathered up his meager savings and went off to watch the grand event. Clutching a few pennies in his hand, the boy thought, I'm just a poor woodcutter. It's because I didn't create sufficient merit in the past that I'm so terribly poor now, and I have nothing to offer. The people in this great family have such wealth that they're able to invite the Buddha and all his followers, and by their generosity they are creating great merit. How wonderful it is that they've obtained this precious opportunity. Feeling pleased in this way, he rejoiced in the merits of others. And with that attitude, he offered his hard-earned pennies to the Buddha. The Buddha accepted his offering with a smile. And as a result of that act of generosity toward the Buddha, together with his rejoicing in the virtue of others, that woodcutter was born into human rebirths for many, many subsequent lives. And in all of those lives, he was born with a golden coin in his hand and lived a life of wealth. The woodcutter's good karma was still not exhausted, for once again, in the present life, he was born as this baby with a gold coin in his hand. When the woodcutter made his gift, he also offered a special dedication prayer in which he expressed powerful faith in the Buddha and respect for his disciples, and he rejoiced in all the merits they were creating. And as a result of that heartfelt prayer, when the boy with the golden coin in his hand got older, he was ordained as a Buddhist monk and eventually attained the highest spiritual result. So I think, we are really prone to blowing off small actions, negative and positive. I think it's really hard for me anyway to keep in mind that these things expand and grow, and to really, not make excuses, not think, oh, it's just a white lie. Oh, it's not going to matter. Everything matters. And I think if we all get that really in our mind, we'll be much more mindful throughout the day and not falling into these habits of, whatever our habits are of not noticing. So then Geshe Sopa goes on to say, you need to gain a firm understanding that even the tiniest karma follows you like a shadow follows the body, and it produces great happiness or great suffering. And once you have confidence in this process, you should pursue virtue even in the smallest deeds that you do, and avoid by all means negative actions. Do the very best you can to behave in this way. This subject of karma is one of the fundamental teachings of Buddhism. It is a cornerstone of all the paths that lead to higher rebirths and to enlightenment. These paths are all based on understanding and practicing karma and its results, as established in the various sutras and taught here in the Lamrim Chenmo. And then Geshe Sopa gives some really good advice, because not all of this is easy to chew on. He says this: when you come to ideas that are not so comfortable, or not easy to understand, or which seem unbelievable and beyond your mental scope, the important thing is that we should not automatically deny them. You should leave your mind open and think, I will not flatly reject these ideas. Maybe eventually I'll understand them. Even when you find statements that are difficult to accept, it is not good to immediately take a negative view. That can be dangerous. Leave the question open and take it as a basis for further investigation. Great advice. And then, let's see, he goes on to talk about something that is really, I think, critical for us to wrap our head around. So he says this: if you continuously behave in a certain way, it becomes your habit. It becomes your nature to act that way. When a particular type of action becomes that ingrained, you will just continue to act in the same manner right on into your future lives. Habits like this are performed helplessly. Without your intending to do so, the actions seem to happen by themselves, the way things happen in a dream. So we all know from our own experience that if we do some activity very intensely during the day, you may continue doing that very action at night in your dreams. I saw this very clearly when my mom started to go down the road of dementia. And she had played the piano her entire life, and she played every single day. And that actually held her in good shape. She went through this process better than my dad did. And so every day until she died, almost, she was playing the piano. And so this gave her some place to go to that was virtuous because she knew it made people happy. The day that she fell, which took her to the hospital, she had just been playing with her friends for 3 hours. And, there was that part of her mind that she could still feel like she was making a contribution and that she was in control. And then every single day that she was in the hospital, she kept asking to go to her piano. And so we did scare up some keyboard for her. But it just gave her joy. And so she continued in that mode. Every time that someone would come in to say goodbye to her in the hospital, she would say, well, let's have a sing-song. And what's your favorite song? So this really was a good habit for her, and we sang Catholic hymns that she knew in Latin, and it was great. So I think we should pay attention to what habits we're currently living right now. And if they're virtuous ones, fantastic, let's add fuel to it. And the negative habits of mind, let's get on it. Because if we don't, this is what we're going to ride into our death and into the next life. That gets my attention. So Geshe Sopa goes on to say, what I'm habituated towards right now, I should ask, is my mind in a state of incessant judging of how others are doing things and behaving, which is a miserable state of mind? Or are we putting sincere effort into noticing what is working and what others are trying to do, given the situation they're in? That's a very good question to ask. Then we should look around in our mind. Are we holding grudges? Even small ones. For example, I wish those people would learn how to clean the tea counter. I would be so happy if they did. Are we unable to forgive? If this is not resolved now, because we don't know when we're going to die, if it's not resolved today, not being able to forgive, this is going to grow and fester. And since we don't know the time of our own death, is this the state of mind we want to have as we're dying? So in my own experience, I've observed a family that was once really well connected. We used to get together a lot, and there were all kinds of joyful merrymaking, and this went on until 10 years ago, and then there was a wedding. Things didn't go well at the wedding, and one member of the family was profoundly insulted. And from that time on, he was pointing the finger of blame, and the family is sort of broken up as a result of this wedding. And this one family member now is still hanging on to this grudge. He cannot forgive. The person he blamed for this whole thing is now dead. And he still can't let go of this. So my great fear for him is that he's nurtured this and fueled it. I mean, this takes energy, right? To hold a grudge takes energy, and it takes mental effort, and the result is only misery. My fear for him is that he will take this with him, and that would be a tragedy. So let's learn from the examples of others where we see they're suffering with this and make a point of dealing with things that need to be cleaned up right away and not thinking, yeah, I'll get to that when I'm retired, or I'll get to that when I'm in the mood, or whatever thing we say to ourselves. But let's do it now. Okay, let's see. So in that same vein, this is back to Geshe Sopa. He says, we should make every effort to produce virtue, and we should make every effort to avoid all non-virtue. He says, we should confess whatever negative actions we've already done and purify them by applying the antidotes. And then the third point in the general characteristics. If an action is not performed, its results will not be met. So if you don't perform an action, you can never experience the result of that action. If you do not perform an action that serves as the cause of a pleasant or unpleasant experience, then you can't have that experience. So, throughout the day we meet with things that are undesirable. Throughout the day we're meeting with things that make us unhappy. And then we have moments of happiness. And just to keep bringing this to mind, we are not going to experience something we haven't created the causes for. So at one point, Venerable jokingly made the point, so for example, getting ready for the quiz. Well, unless we prepare for the quiz, we're not going to have a clue. That chapter 11 happened a long time ago. And praying to Buddha at 5:30 at night, 30 minutes before the teaching starts, is not going to be the way it's going to happen. So if we want to have the causes, for understanding and the teachings to come, we have to put in the effort. It's not going to just happen. Let's see. Well, can you take one more thing here? This was this was interesting. So someone asked the question in this book, in Geshe Sopa's book. If it's true that you can't meet the results of karma that you did not perform yourself, how do you explain the case in which the Buddha's enlightenment created great happiness for countless other beings? As a bodhisattva, the Buddha accumulated countless merits for many eons until he finally attained the highest goal of Buddhahood. But when he attained enlightenment, he was not the only one who benefited from his actions. Many other sentient beings have experienced many good results by virtue of his vast accumulation of merits. Another example is the case of Buddha Amitabha, who resides in the Pure Land of Sukhavati. When he was a bodhisattva, he dedicated all of his virtue to other sentient beings with a powerful vow. Until sentient beings were able to be born into his Pure Land, he would not become a Buddha. Because of that bodhisattva's vow, that pure motivation to benefit all other beings, and his creation of virtue over many lives, countless beings have been able to be born into Amitabha's Pure Land. So the question is that contradictory to the law of karma that says you cannot experience the results of actions performed by another? So Tsongkhapa says that those who experience good results by virtue of the actions of a Buddha or Bodhisattva do not need to have accumulated all of the merits and virtuous karma performed by those exalted beings, but they do need to have performed some portion of those positive deeds themselves. In other words, there must be an appropriate relationship between their own virtuous karma and the results they experience. Without creating any of the virtuous actions that can act as the cause for such a happy result, you will not be able to meet that experience. Okay. There is one more story here. This is not meant to scare us, but it will get your attention. And I think actually we have to get our attention caught all the time. So this is in relation to actions that are done. Do not perish. Okay, let's see. And here we have the story of Maudagliana, who was renowned among the Buddha's disciples as the one with the greatest miraculous powers. In one of his previous lives, he quarreled with his mother, and in a fit of anger he said to her, "I wish your head was beaten like a piece of clay." Many lifetimes later, he became a direct disciple of the Buddha and attained arhatship. At that time, he saw with his supernatural knowledge that the teacher of a band of ascetics who were opposed to the Buddha had been born into hell for teaching his students to practice animal sacrifice. Maudagliana went to those ascetics and tried to persuade them not to kill for the sake of performing these sacrifices. But his interference only made them mad and angry and just inflamed. So one day they descended upon him in his meditation hut and beat him to a pulp with clubs. It was, of course, a great shock to the Buddha's disciples that such a great arhat could come to such a violent end. The Buddha explained that Maudagliana met this experience as a result of the harsh words he had spoken to his mother. The karmic result of using those hurtful words was that he was beaten to death by this band of ascetics. As the basis of discipline concludes, even in 100 eons, karma will never be lost. When the time comes and they meet the conditions, beings will surely experience the results. It wouldn't be fair to end on that note. All right. So, lastly, from Geshe Sopa. You live with the afflictions constantly threatening you. 1 minute desire is arising, the next minute jealousy, and then comes hatred. You must understand clearly that these are your most dangerous enemies. And you must stand up to them with courage. Standing up to them means always resisting the urge to yield to their temptations. In order to do that, you may face many discomforts, hardships, and pain. But whatever difficulties you may face, you must bear them with the enthusiasm of knowing that you are on the path that will finally vanquish these enemies. So our teachers are teaching us the antidotes. Our teachers are teaching us the path to full awakening. So it's up to us to practice. So, there's probably no time for questions. But there's a few moments for comments, and then if there's questions, it'll be a group think. Comments? Yeah.
Just earlier this week or last week, I was reading that book and I went through that story on the coin, and I had a lot of trouble with it, and it bothered me, but I kept trying to remember, when something does that, just kind of set it aside, don't immediately reject it. So I spent a couple days thinking about it, and I eventually talked to some community members about it and got some things cleared up. And when you read it again, I was interested to see how I would experience it. When you read it, it was very motivational, and my mind didn't go to any of the struggles or any of the places that it went to before. So it was really nice to see all those things that everybody says. If you do these things, you'll make progress or experience good results.
Great. That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Can you explain what the mind can think of this?
Can I explain what?
Your mind, where the mind went.
Sure. When they read it, when I read it, I was focusing specifically on one aspect of the story, and that was coin spontaneously appearing in his hand. And I didn't understand how that could happen. I was trying to figure out if karma could override physical causality and all this other stuff, which wasn't the point of the story. So the second time when I heard it, I focused on the point in his sincere joy in seeing other people be creating merit, and then in his willingness to donate everything he had to somebody that he respected and saw a lot of value on. And when my mind was focused on that, very, very inspirational, very moving, as opposed to nitpicking.
I think one of the things that I think that is important to remember is that story is so much around the motivation of his actions.
Right.
You can do all the virtuous external stuff that you want, but if you're doing it under the control of the 8 worldly concerns, it's not going to bring that exponential result. It might do the opposite, as a matter of fact. So what I love about that story is his mind.
Right.
That someone in that dire circumstance had a big enough mind to rejoice in other people who may or may not have been showing him any compassion or helping him at all, but he was so free of judging where they were in relationship to his circumstance, not blaming, not comparing, not feeling badly or jealous. So that mind is what propelled him to have that kind of ripening in the future. So I think that's the part we always have to remember, is why we're doing the actions is what really propels the virtue or the happiness or the suffering in the future. You know, it can be really...
Yeah, and this deep realization that he was in his situation because of previous karma, and so if he started being generous himself, with whatever he could do, that things would change.
He had very impressive right views.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a very massive, complex topic, and those are just the general characteristics. And even just contemplating those 4 points, I think, can take us a long way towards making changes in our mind. So any questions that you do have, Venerable Children will be here pretty soon. Join us next Friday and send those questions in to office.sravasti@gmail.com. And in the meantime, let's take advantage of every opportunity to engage in little virtues. Okay, let's dedicate.